Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Today is Friday, January 29th, 2021. Welcome back to Jacob Talks Politics. In this video, I'm going to be taking the Political Compass Test. The Political Compass Test is on politicalcompasstest.org, as you can see in the top of my screen. It is a website with a tool that allows you to pinpoint yourself on the political compass. What is the political compass? Well, it's a coordinate plane with an x-axis representing economic stances and a y-axis representing social stances. The further to the left you're placed on the compass, the more you believe wealth should be owned by the collective society. The further to the right you are, the more you believe that wealth should be determined by the competition of corporations and individuals. The further up you are on the compass, the stronger you believe the government's authority should be. The further down you are, the more you believe that the individual should be freer from authority. The test contains 62 statements to which you answer either strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. Unfortunately, there is no neutral option, so you are forced to either agree or disagree with every statement. I've taken this test several times over the past few years, and even though my result has never been exactly the same, I've always ended up somewhere in the libertarian left or bottom left quadrant of the political compass. So I'm going to go here and begin the test. It says, before taking the test, please note that this is not a survey and these aren't questions, they're propositions. To question the logic of individual ones that irritate you is to miss the point. Some propositions are extreme and some are moderate. That's how we can show you whether you lean towards extremism or moderation on the compass. Your responses should not be overthought. Some of them are intentionally vague. Their purpose is to trigger reactions in the mind, measuring feelings and prejudices rather than detailed opinions on policy. So I am going to kind of explain a lot of my answers here, so this might be a bit of a long video. But we are on page 1 of 6, and the first statement is, if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. So I'm going to have to strongly agree with this question. I have absolutely no problem with capitalism, the free market and economic competition, and companies making money. But if a company is going to put the bank accounts of its shareholders as its first priority while disregarding human well-being, then I don't think that they should even be in business. So I strongly agree with this. The next one is, I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. I disagree with this one. I would consider doing strongly disagree, but I just disagree with it. My country, the United States, has done a lot of things that I don't really support at all. A lot of the operations carried out by the FBI, the CIA, and the military are very controversial and inhumane. Numerous times, the U.S. has overthrown democratically elected leaders and has financed and backed nations directly tied to genocide. So, no, I would not always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. The next one is, no one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. Let's see. I'm gonna have to disagree with this one. I would say even though country of birth isn't chosen by people when they're born, it's still definitely something you can be proud of, but not just because you were born there, but because of the ideas that that country stands for. So I'm going to disagree with this one. The next one is, our race has many superior qualities compared with other races, and I fully disagree with this one. Obviously, I'm not a racist. I would hope that nobody agrees with this statement, and I think that no race is superior to another race. Every race has millions and even billions of people attached to it, each with different good and bad qualities, so there is no good reason to make a generalization about an entire group of people solely based on their skin color or where they're from. Next one is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Whenever I come back and take this test, this is one of the questions that I kind of struggle with because it's kind of asking me to give an absolute agree or disagree, and I wish there was a neutral option. And again, up here it did give a little warning as to the complicatedness of each question. But I'm going to go ahead and agree with this one. Yeah, I'm going to agree with it because strategically speaking, if two countries have a common enemy that needs to be eliminated, even if those two countries are also adversaries, they can work together temporarily to defeat the common enemy. So I'm going to agree with it. And then military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. I'm going to go ahead and say agree for this one just because there are probably some scenarios where I would justify defying international law for military action. I can't think of one, but it is definitely possible, so agree. And there is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Strongly agree. I mean, I definitely agree with this one. If you look at the media in this country, especially in the United States, where there is a huge lack of media literacy, critical thinking, basic logic, and a healthy amount of skepticism towards content that is being released, you'll probably find that this statement can be agreed with. I think that media companies ranging from TV, radio, and online news channels to satire shows to newspapers and social media should be urged to better clarify the difference between information and entertainment-based content. Now on to the next page. This one is on the economy. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. I'm going to go ahead and say agree to this one, but let me explain it. I think it's sort of obvious that both social classes and ethnic and racial groups are both divided in society. You'll find wealthy neighborhoods within cities, like Beverly Hills, for example, and you'll also find poorer neighborhoods within cities, and not just cities, but urban or no, suburban and rural areas too. And unfortunately, what you'll find is that many, but not all of these poorer communities are majority minority, while wealthier neighborhoods are majority white. And that's not to say that there aren't poorer white people and wealthier people of color, but for the most part, nationality and class often go hand in hand when you see where groups of people live. So agree with this one. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Disagree. I'm not too well informed on the details of economics and how inflation is caused and what it can cause, but as far as I'm concerned, it's more important that we give as many people a job as possible. And when we do this, we have a lot more people making more money from those jobs. And typically, when people who are more likely or more prone to becoming unemployed actually have a job, they tend to use their earned income to buy products and services such as housing, food, water, electricity, transportation, and education, which in turn stimulates the economy. Uh, because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily project or protect the environment, they require regulation. I definitely agree with this one. I agree with this. Big gas companies like Chevron and ExxonMobil are huge contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, and while they have the right to extract oil and make a profit off of it, it becomes damaging to societies when they pump billions of tons of pollutants uh, into the environment. And I'm a supporter of the free market, so I don't fully support shutting down these corporations, even though that would be the ideal. But they definitely require regulation because if gone unchecked, the effects of climate change we're experiencing now would be happening a lot faster and they would be way worse. This one is quote, from each according to his ability to each according to his need, unquote, is a fundamentally good idea. I agree with this one. I believe that this quote is something that was said by Karl Marx, who of course is a very famous communist, was a famous communist philosopher. Fundamentally, I do think that this is a good idea, but practically it just doesn't work. But I do agree. The freer the market, the freer the people. I'm going to have to disagree with this one, uh, even though it might at first sound as if we do have a free market, then the people are free. But let me explain this. This would be true in a perfect world, that would be the case, but the reality is that when companies are free to do whatever they want, they tend to put profits above people, so what we end up having is multi-billion dollar corporations using the free market in an unfair way that allows them to make more money at the expense of the average consumer. So I disagree with this statement. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded, and consumer product. Yeah, I agree with this. I believe that basic products and services that are necessary for us to survive should not be used to exploit people by companies for their money. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. This is a tough one based on all the other things that I believe, but basically what it's asking is whether I think that property should be a product sold on the free market or if it should be free of charge and handed out by the government. And land or property is something that I think should be able to be bought and sold, so I disagree with this. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to society, to their society. Yes, I strongly agree with this one. It's unfortunate that there are people who make millions and billions of dollars, and that they're able to build up all of that wealth simply by buying and selling shares of stock rather than actually productively working at a job. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Yeah, I would say protection is sometimes necessary in trade, so I'll agree with that. Protectionism, if you don't know, is basically where a country restricts imports from other countries by tariffs and subsidies, etc., in order to protect its own domestic industries. It isn't absolutely a necessary thing, but for the purposes of protecting your own national security and economy, yeah, I would say that it's sometimes necessary. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. I disagree with this. Now, of course, this is what a company is designed to do. Companies are made in a way to ensure that executives are able to maximize profit while minimizing expenses. I think companies should find an equilibrium to that so that they are able to still make money while also prioritizing workers and consumers. The rich are too highly taxed. I strongly disagree with this. The rich are not too highly taxed. Currently, the top marginal tax rate is about 37% of income over like $510,000. Uh, I think we need to add additional tax brackets at 40%, 45%, and maybe even 50%. There was a study done by I believe it was MIT, although there are probably many studies like this. And what they found was a point where you can maximize tax revenue without de-incentivizing work. And this number was somewhere in the 80 to 90% range. And if I were president, would not go that high, but the rich definitely are not paying as much in taxes as what would be necessary for the best possible economy. And also, I think like in the 1950s, the top marginal tax rate was like 90 something percent. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. I definitely strongly disagree with this. I think that the amount of money that you have or make should not determine how good your healthcare is. Healthcare is something that every person should have equal access to, regardless of their ability to pay. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. I'm gonna have to disagree with this one. Penalizing businesses that mislead the public is a violation of the First Amendment. Now, this does depend, and I'm debating this. Now, fraud is the wrongful or criminal deception intended to result in financial or personal gain. And fraud is illegal as it should be, but if this is asking about general misinformation and disinformation by media or whatever, I don't think the government should necessarily penalize that, but what the government can and should do, in my opinion, is to inform the public about what is and isn't correct information. And this also goes back to the point I made earlier about media literacy and critical thinking. The last one in this category, in this page, a genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. I have to agree with this, and it's similar to some of the other answers I gave earlier about companies taking advantage of the free market in order to exploit consumers and workers, but I agree with this. Now we're on to page 3, where we'll look at some personal social values. All right, abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. I disagree with this. In my personal view, women should have full access to abortions regardless of the reason before the fetus has a detectable heartbeat and brain activity, which typically starts around 6 weeks, I think. Once the first trimester passes, access should be a little more limited in my view, and once the fetus actually becomes viable, meaning it has more than a 50% chance of surviving outside of the room, which starts at around 24 weeks, that's when I think that abortions should be restricted only in cases where the woman's life is threatened or the quality of the life of the baby will be devastatingly poor. So I disagree with this. All authority should be questioned. Agree. I think that all authority should be questioned, but this is not indefinite. I think it's good to have a healthy amount of skepticism and questioning about everything, but this can become very dangerous when you're so skeptical of everything that you choose not to believe or abide by anything that you're told. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I'm gonna have to say no on this one, so disagree. The concept of quote an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, was meant only for like money related offenses when it was described first in biblical texts. I'm against the death penalty, so I don't think that a murder should be punished with murder by the government or capital punishment. And if you cause $2,000 in damages to someone's car, you should pay back that $2,000. So because it seems like this question is asking if the eye for an eye philosophy is indefinite, I'm going to say no, so disagree. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. Agree, you shouldn't have to fund something that doesn't have any chance at gaining revenue. That's plain and simple. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. This question is a little vague, and I know that was mentioned at the very beginning as to whether it means public schools or private schools or homeschool attendance. But I would say that schools should not make attendance compulsory. The government can't and shouldn't force parents to send their kids into a classroom. However, children should be educated in some way, the best way being through school, so that they pass certain academic standards and are able to go to college, possibly get a job and make money and be useful in their lives. So, agree with this. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. This question is also pretty vague in that it doesn't really specify what it means by their own kind. It's whether it's referring to political or religious values or whether it's referring to race, ethnicity, or nationality, in which case that would be a definite disagree. I think that people should be able to interact with and be with any whatever types of people they want. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. This is a weird one. And if I was a parent, spanking would not be my go to method of punishment. And there are also numerous methods to being a good parent. So I'm going to choose agree because spanking may and probably does work sometimes. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. Yes, I would say it is natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. uh, Children are typically of a different generation from their parents, so sometimes I guess it can feel like they naturally feel like they can't or shouldn't let their parents know certain things. I don't really know, but I guess I could say it's natural. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. I strongly agree with this. I have never and don't plan on ever smoking marijuana, but I know that it is not a harmful drug, and as long as it's being used for personal use, for medical or recreational purposes, I'm completely fine with it being used. I think it should be legalized and decriminalized. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. I strongly agree with this one. Producing smart, strong, and productive children is what schooling systems should prioritize, and there's not much else to be said about this one. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Yeah, this one is a no-brainer. I strongly disagree. Of course, I'm not a eugenicist. I think that no matter what genetic traits you have, you cannot and should not be prevented from reproducing. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. I disagree with this. I think it is important for children to learn accepting discipline, but I certainly do not think it's the most important thing. Okay. There are no savage and civilized peoples, there are only different cultures. So this is a really tough one. When I used to take this, I put agree because what I understood was that you cannot reasonably hold people of an entirely different culture to your own moral standards, and people in other cultures live by the morals and values that they grew up knowing, and it's all that they do know. And I still do mostly stand by that, but I think I will agree with this. What I was thinking is that there are cultures and groups of people that are just flat out bad, no matter how you look at it. They're savage. If you look at Nazi Germany or Al Qaeda or the regime in North Korea, still, I'm going to stick with how I've always answered this and agree with it because the question, like many of the other ones, are somewhat vague. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. I strongly agree with this. It's not that complicated. If you can work and you choose not to, you should not expect social welfare systems to help you because you don't deserve it. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. Yeah, I generally agree with this. It depends, but typically staying sad and letting your problems pull you down is very unproductive, so agree. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. This is also sort of vague because it doesn't specify what fully integrated is supposed to mean, but if it's asking whether a first generation immigrant given time can become unable to be distinguished amongst members of the native population that lives there, which I'm going to assume is what they meant. I'm going to disagree with it because I think that full integration is possible. What's good for the most successful corporations is always, ultimately, good for all of us. Disagree, unsurprisingly. This is because there are a huge amount of companies that obviously just don't serve the interests of the common population, thus their success does not mean success for all of us. And the last one of page 3, I believe we're on. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. I'm just gonna put agree and leave it at that. I don't have much of an opinion on this other than that people really shouldn't have to fund a broadcasting institution, and I think this is probably referring to PBS, in which they have no say in the content that is being showed from it. Now, how I see in the wider society, this is page 4 of 6, more than halfway done. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. I'm kind of in the middle on this one personally, just because uh, me personally and nobody that I know isn't really experiencing any disruptions in civil liberties for the purposes of counterterrorism. However, it is something that occurs often to certain people, so I'm going to say agree to this. Go ahead, go up to your search bar in your computer or phone, look up the Patriot Act. You can find out about that. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. I strongly disagree with this one. I am very much against the idea of a one-party state, and even though we have two major political parties in the US, they are both mostly backed by major corporations and executives, and on the political spectrum, they are fairly close to each other. So even though they disagree on a good amount of social, economic, and foreign policy, the Democratic and Republican parties make the US kind of like a divided one party state. I would like to see a lot more major parties in our country that represent a much bigger range of political views. If you look at other countries like Australia and Israel, basically every other country, they have more, every other democratic country, they have way more than just two major parties. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Even if someone hasn't done anything wrong, they still have a right to privacy, and I would be worried if the government was watching everything I do, even though I'm not doing anything wrong, so I disagree with this. The death penalty should be an option only for the most should be an option for the most serious crimes. I've always been somewhat torn on the death penalty, but recently I've moved towards the side that's against the death penalty. I don't think we should be killing any of our own citizens, no matter how serious the crime, so disagree. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Disagree. I think that a civilized society does not necessarily have to have authority. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Well, first of all, whose place is it at all to determine what's art and what isn't? I think abstract art can definitely be considered art. The beauty in abstract art is that it's up to interpretation to the viewer to decide what it is and what it means. So, strongly disagree. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. Again, this question is asking it as if everything was in black and white, which it's not. I think for nonviolent criminals, rehabilitation is important, but for very violent and dangerous criminals, especially those who have been convicted multiple times, rehabilitation should not be a priority. They should be locked away and kept from further harming society. So, in a general sense, disagree. It is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. This goes back to the last question. There is no good reason that a criminal convicted numerous times of crimes such as murder and rape and kidnapping deserve a chance at rehabilitation. So, agree. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. I disagree with this because writers and artists and people with such jobs, creative jobs, oftentimes they're those who create ideas that drive humanity forward. So disagree with this. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. No. Mothers can do whatever they want. Making a home and raising children isn't the sole responsibility and purpose for a woman. Remember that this is the 21st century, not the 19th century. So, strongly disagree. Multinational corporations are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. I don't know too much about this topic, but from what I understand, I would agree with this. And the last one for page 4, making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Again, I wish there was a no opinion or neutral option for these because I don't really have an opinion, but I'm just going to say disagree with this. Now we're on to page 5. It says, if you got through that okay, you'll find these propositions on religion a breeze. Astrology accurately explains many things. I strongly disagree with this. Astrology is entirely made up. It's based on nothing true, and any correlations between what astrology says and what is reality is purely a coincidence. You cannot be moral without being religious. I disagree with this one too. I'm gonna put strong. No, I'll put I'll just put disagree. I definitely think you can be moral without being religious. Religions are literally just massive groups of people who believe the same general beliefs about human existence, creation, and purpose, and you're fully able to have your own morals and not be religious at the same time. Charity is better than social security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. I'm putting disagree for this. Uh, yeah, I'm going to put disagree because even though our social safety net systems clearly are nowhere near perfect, a social security system at its best hypothetically would work better than charity. Some people are naturally unlucky. Disagree. I think that everything that happens to you has a cause, and something will always have caused whatever happens to you, no matter how significant or insignificant that cause is. So no, some people are not naturally unlucky, in my opinion. The last one for the are we on page 4, page 5? Page 5, okay, almost done. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. I strongly disagree with this. As far as public schools go, and in my opinion, all schools, religious values are not something I think should be taught or promoted in them, especially in public schools, which I said. And the final page, page 6. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Disagree. I'm not going to go into detail on this one or most of the ones in this final page, but a couple, in my opinion, has every right to be as intimate or not intimate or whatever as they choose, and it's nobody's business except theirs. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Strongly agree with this. Same-sex couples should have all of the same rights as heterosexual couples. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. I don't really care about this one. There's no granted right to this, but it also depends on who would be restricting it. But I'm just going to put agree. If the government was restricting it, I would say disagree, but just generally it should be legal. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Let's see, I strongly agree with this one. It doesn't need much of an explanation. I am completely for privacy and freedom, and the government doesn't get to restrict what this is asking. No one can feel naturally homosexual. I disagree with this. Just because of the way the question is phrased, I'm struggling to figure out whether my response should be agree or disagree. But I'm going to put disagree for this one. But again, I'm struggling to figure out exactly what it is that it's asking, just because of the weird way that it's being asked. But disagree. And the final question: these days, openness about sex has gone too far. Uh, it's. I'm gonna go with disagree for this one because it's not clear what exactly it's referring to, and it also isn't my place or anybody else's to determine how far openness can go. And from what I've seen, it's not too far open. So now let's see where I stand. Okay, so before I go all the way down to my results, I don't think I showed you a picture of the political compass before, so here's a picture here. You can see the left right is economic, so further to the left means more collectivized communitarian society in terms of economics, and then further to the right is more competitive, individual, capitalist, laissez-faire sort of economics, and then further to the top is more obedience to authority, and further down is more freedom and less authority. All right. So based on all of my responses, I have been placed. Oh wait, this is interesting. They just Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Mahatma Gandhi, Margaret Thatcher, and Milton Friedman. These are just some famous people in politics and political thought, just to see where they are on the spectrum. Okay. So based on all of my responses, I have been placed in the social libertarian economic left quadrant of the political compass. My x-axis results are negative 4.63, and my social results are negative 4.51. I'm going to claim my free political compass test certificate. My name will say it's Jacob Talks Politics. Open the certificate. And on the certificate is a bunch of caricatures of famous people in politics. And if we see where I have been placed, I am near people such as Howie Hawkins, who was the Green Party candidate for president in 2020. Bernie Sanders, who hopefully most of you have heard of. He's a prominent leftist in the Democratic Party. Well, not really leftist. He identifies as a democratic socialist. Nelson Mandela, who I believe was the first president of South Africa, and someone named Caroline Lucas, who I've never heard of. All right, so go back here. All right, so thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you're interested in seeing political content like this, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share the channel with your friends.